I had always believed my family was unremarkable. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, just somewhere in that middle space where birthdays were celebrated with store-bought cakes, and vacations meant a rented cabin near a lake. My mother, Diane, was strict but loving, the kind of woman who kept a spotless house and insisted on knowing where I was at all times. That night in late October, I came home later than I should have. The rain had soaked through my jacket, and the kitchen light spilled out in a warm rectangle across the wet driveway. I could hear her voice before I even opened the door. She was on the phone, speaking in that low, urgent tone she used when something was wrong. "No, he doesn't know," she said, pausing. "He thinks I'm his mother. He always will, unless someone tells him." I froze just outside the door. My heart thudded in my chest. He thinks I'm his mother. The words hit me like a slap. I eased the door open, trying to look casual, but my mind was a storm. She ended the call quickly when she saw me, sliding her phone into her sweater pocket. "You're late," she said, her tone clipped. The rest of the night, I couldn't stop hearing those words on a loop. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something in her eyes, something guarded, warned me off. The next morning, I tried anyway. Over coffee, I asked, "Hey, what was that phone call about last night?" Her gaze hardened instantly. "What phone call?" she asked too quickly. "The one you ended when I came in. You said I wasn't your—" "Stop." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you ever bring that up again." The force in her tone shut me down. I left for work with my stomach knotted, but I knew one thing for certain. She was hiding something. Over the next week, I started noticing other things. Old family photos missing from the hallway wall. The locked drawer in her bedroom desk that I'd never paid attention to before. One Saturday, while she was at the grocery store, I slipped into her room. The desk drawer was locked tight, but the key wasn't hard to find, taped under the vanity. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes, each marked with dates from before I was born. At the very bottom was a faded birth certificate. My birth certificate, only it wasn't. The name in the mother field wasn't Diane. It was Elaine Harper. I sat there staring at it, my hand shaking. My mother, or the woman I thought was my mother, wasn't even listed. I stuffed the papers back just as I heard her car in the driveway. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to that name, Elaine Harper. Was she my biological mother? Had Diane adopted me? Why had no one ever told me? I tried searching the name online, but nothing came up except a few outdated records, an address 2 states away, an old phone number. No photos, no social media. It was like she'd vanished. The next step came almost by accident. I was meeting my friend Aaron for lunch, and when I told him about the strange discovery, he suggested something I hadn't thought of. "Do a DNA test," he said, shrugging. "Ancestry sites. They'll match you with relatives. Could give you some answers." 2 weeks later, the results came in. I remember staring at the screen, my pulse hammering. The matches were all strangers, except one. A man named Victor Harper. The site said he was my biological father. I didn't know whether to feel excited or terrified. Clicking on his profile, I found only one note: currently incarcerated, state penitentiary. A quick search pulled up the rest. Victor Harper had been convicted of second-degree murder 22 years ago. The victim's name? Richard Collins. My stomach twisted. That was Diane's maiden name. I confronted her that night. "I know about Victor Harper," I said, my voice shaking. The blood drained from her face. "You've been digging. He's my father, isn't he? And he killed someone in your family." She sank into a chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "Richard Collins was my brother. Your uncle. Victor, he killed him. Or at least, that's what the court decided." Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Because your life was better not knowing, she whispered. Because I didn't want you looking for him. He's dangerous. And if certain people knew who you were, they would come after you. Her words were meant to protect me. But all I heard was a lifetime of lies. By then, I knew I couldn't stop. I had to find out the rest, whether it destroyed us or not. Once Diane had admitted the truth about Victor Harper being my biological father, the air in the house felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. But her warning only sharpened my resolve. I had grown up believing I knew where I came from, and now I felt like my entire identity had been stolen from me. I needed answers, and I couldn't rely on her to give them. I started with the court records. It took hours of combing through archives, requesting documents, and dodging suspicious questions from the clerk who retrieved the files. But eventually, I was holding the transcripts from Victor's trial. The story they told was grim. Richard Collins, Diane's brother, had been found dead in his garage. Blunt force trauma to the head. Witnesses testified that Victor had been seen leaving the property the night of the murder after a heated argument. The prosecution painted a picture of a jealous, volatile man who resented Richard's success and his disapproval of Victor's relationship with Elaine Harper, my real mother. But then came the part that made my skin crawl. The trial records ended with Victor's conviction and life sentence. But there was barely any mention of Elaine after that, as if she'd stepped out of the world entirely. I knew I needed to find her. It took 3 weeks, several dead-end addresses, and a surprising amount of help from Aaron, who turned out to have a knack for digging through public databases. Eventually, we found a trace, and Elaine Harper living under a different last name in a remote part of Montana. I booked a flight without telling Diane. The town was small, the kind of place where strangers draw stares. I found her house, a weathered single-story with peeling paint and a wind chime that clinked in the cold air. When she opened the door, I saw my own eyes looking back at me. "I know who you are," I said before she could speak. Tears welled in her eyes instantly. She stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and old books. "I never thought you'd come," she whispered. She told me everything. How she had fallen in love with Victor despite warnings from her friends and family. How Richard, her brother, had despised him and tried to force her to leave. The night Richard died, she claimed she wasn't home, but she believed Victor when he said he hadn't done it. When Victor was arrested, Elaine found herself isolated, judged by her own family. Diane, her childhood friend, stepped in. She offered to raise me as her own, to shield me from the shame and the whispers. Elaine agreed, broken and afraid. "But if he didn't do it," I said slowly, "then who did?" Her gaze darkened. "There are things Diane never told you. Richard was mixed up in dangerous business. He had enemies." I couldn't ignore the chance to hear Victor's side. A week later, I was sitting in a sterile visiting room, waiting for a man I'd only ever seen in grainy mugshots. When he walked in, he was taller than I expected, with a presence that filled the space. His eyes scanned me like he was memorizing every detail. "You're mine," he said finally, sitting across from me. He told me he had loved Elaine, that Richard's hatred had been mutual. On the night of the murder, he admitted, they had argued, but he swore he'd left before anything happened. He claimed Richard had gotten involved with a local crime family, and that the killing was a message to someone else. "And Diane?" I asked. A small smile tugged at his mouth. "She was the only one who believed you deserved a chance. But she also knew too much. If the wrong people figured out you were mine, you'd be in danger." The more I dug, the more the pieces started fitting together, and the more dangerous it became. I received an anonymous note under my apartment door one night. "Stop asking questions, or you'll end up like your uncle." I confronted Diane one last time, slamming the note down on the kitchen table. She broke then. She told me Richard had been laundering money for a crime syndicate. When he tried to back out, they made an example of him. Victor had been an easy scapegoat, volatile, an outsider, already despised by the Collins family. Diane had taken me in not just to protect me from the scandal, but because the same people had threatened to kill me if Elaine didn't disappear. Now I was left with the truth, jagged and heavy. I could go public, push for a retrial for Victor, bring the syndicate's crimes into the light. But that would mean dragging Diane, Elaine, and myself into a fight with dangerous people who had already proven what they were capable of. Or I could let it go. Live with the knowledge, and the lies, and the weight of a father rotting in prison for a crime he might not have committed. I stood in Diane's kitchen, the note still on the table between us. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. Some truths, once uncovered, can't be buried again. And some decisions, once made, can never be undone.